Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Let's get to it, shall we? Number of revelations occurring right now, I think, and a lot of things being exposed as well. And these are good things, because again, in this war, people are having to pick sides, and a lot of things are being revealed as to what people are willing to discuss, and of course, what they are not willing to discuss. And by making certain moves, they're proving to everybody who controls them. So let me mention this off the top here. It was brought to my attention from Josiah Richwine, and then I started looking it up on X and then came across it. Apparently, Stu Peters and a buddy of his were kicked out of the Delta Center during one of Tucker Carlson's talks with Glenn Beck. And the two of them were apparently going to be on stage, and then there was some VIP meet and greet after the fact, or beforehand, or whatever it was. And Stu had apparently paid for this to be the case. And then they walk in, and then they walk up to the sign-in desk or the check-in desk or whatever, and then they ended up basically being told that they aren't allowed to meet them and that they're not even allowed to attend the entire talk. And then they were unceremoniously kicked out. This right here, again, is continuing to expose what people are willing to discuss and what people want to learn and what people don't. Who is controlled and who is not. Tucker Carlson is controlled. Glenn Beck is controlled. We know this. Those guys operate on a completely different wavelength where they have far less knowledge and yet a much larger voice and many more people who apparently listen to their shows. It's remarkably unfortunate, because I would wish that more people would call them out for being the dummies that they are and not mentioning who the real enemies are. Again, very recently, Tucker Carlson apparently had a guest on his particular show talking about the history of World War II. There was plenty of mention of Winston Churchill, of course, not being the stand-up guy that a number of individuals claim him to be, or would certainly say that he is, when of course he was not. He was a warmonger and a Freemason and completely owned and controlled by the Jewish moneylenders, and basically everybody knows that, but apparently this is new to Tucker Carlson and he was completely unaware. The issue here, of course, is that the shocked look on these people's faces when you explain something to them is astounding. And they're perplexed. Again, these are not awake people. They just aren't. Tucker Carlson is not awake as much as he claims to be and certainly plays off like he is. He isn't. He still runs in these cliques and these clubs, and he still runs with these particular individuals who are equally as foolish as he is. And you've always heard me warn about people who find their way to these stages. These kinds of people really cannot be trusted. They're either in it for the money, they're grifting off of people's lack of knowledge, and they're trying to profit from their own lack of knowledge while possibly not even knowing what they don't know. But what they're certainly not going to do is say anything that might offend someone, when sadly, they don't seem to understand that it's only offensive to someone who is not knowledgeable about a particular thing that is being discussed. So if they get queasy by referencing, again, the Jewish lobby or anything else and who the real enemy is in the world and manipulates all of these people and these places and movements of individuals and then, of course, taxation and a million other things, that if you even bring that up, they will get the Agent Smith Matrix look on their face and immediately flip out against you. And Tucker Carlson, by the way, does that all of the time. In fact, his tell is his laugh. See, his laugh gets a lot of play when it comes to him laughing something off or getting nervous with someone in public or even, again, on camera or wherever it may be. Someone approaches him and asks him about a particular thing. He does that nervous laugh that he has. That, again, gets him a lot of attention, but it's a tell, and it's almost a subconscious tick that he has. Again, with this being one of his tells, it really doesn't make him too much different from those that he criticizes, certainly on the proverbial left, which is a massive problem, I think. But when he's on these stages again with the Russell Brands of the world and Vivek Ramaswamys of the world and what have you, that when he's doing all of that, he isn't any different than, say, the old-timey Bill O'Reilly. When Bill O'Reilly used to do a stage tour and was on stage and, again, was grifting off of people and come and listen to us because we're the know-it-alls. Come and listen to us because, again, we have a spotlight on us and we're sitting in comfortable furniture on a stage and you were dumb enough to actually show up and pay to listen to us when you could actually listen to us any other time. Again, that very activity, in my opinion, is a complete waste of time and a complete waste of money, and it is a grift because you're grifting off of the individuals who actually know far less than what the people on stage do, because why else would they be there? Is it really because Tucker Carlson's that interesting? Is it really because Russell Brand is that interesting? Is it because Glenn Beck is really that interesting? How about Tim Pool? Tim Pool's a perfect example. You've heard me criticize him before in the past. There are endless things he will not bring up. There are endless things he will not say. That's why he continues to exist on YouTube and rakes in approximately $10,000 a week, at least. He rakes in about $10,000 a week, approximately, allegedly, and yet the guy doesn't change his clothes. Rather weird, isn't it? Again, if he were in high school, he'd get made fun of really hard by everybody. But he has an Israeli flag and a Ukrainian flag in his profile, next to his profile picture on X. And then openly says, again, very recently, regarding the whole tenant media thing, that he's going to be working with the FBI and helping them get to the bottom of what it is that they're concerned with. Why? What are you doing? Why are you grifting off of people? Why does anybody listen to your show? He's not that interesting. He has nothing to offer. But this is the grift. They're using people. And what these individuals are doing, which is astounding, is that when, again, Glenn Beck and Tucker Carlson were in Salt Lake City, I believe, and they were giving a speech on stage, and Stu Peters and his buddy got kicked out because they were told that they didn't want to shake their hands or they didn't want to meet him or they weren't even allowed to attend the entire speech, let alone the VIP behind the scenes, let's take a picture with one another kind of thing. That when they do that, they expose themselves for who they really are in the blink of an eye. That's all it takes. All it takes is one move like that and kicking out somebody who's far more knowledgeable on endless subjects like Stu Peters is, as opposed, of course, to Glenn Beck and Tucker Carlson. That right there shows that the club that they're in is no different than the enemy club that they criticize themselves and make a living criticizing. They're the exact same problem. They are basically Fox News 2.0. So Glenn Beck and Tucker Carlson did what on stage? I bet they had a nice conversation about what it was like to work at Fox News and what an odd place. And then all of a sudden they weren't allowed to talk about particular things. And that's why they got kicked off and that's why they got fired and blah, blah, blah. So they play the victim. And then they rope everybody in by saying, we're the victim. Give us money even though we're multimillionaires, but give us money anyway. And come and listen to our speeches and come and listen to us make fun of Fox News because that old yarn hasn't been played out enough yet. And people do it. But kicking out the likes of Stu Peters and not even wanting to be seen with him, let alone shake his hand, let alone answer a question or be asked a question by somebody who's far more knowledgeable, I'm telling you what, that move right there exposes them for exactly who they are. They are the gatekeepers also. There is no doubt about it. Because in a free and open society with the First Amendment, people should be able to talk and openly converse with one another about anything, in particular when it comes to wanting to teach one another about particular things that some might know that others don't know, again, in the interest of educating them so that they are more knowledgeable on a number of subjects. But again, the exposure of these individuals and their shows is really a catch-22 for them. Because when they're asking each other questions in their own echo chambers, they can't hear themselves talk. And they, of course, aren't interacting, really, with anybody in the audience. Because, again, they have their own shows and they're not taking calls. I mean, Glenn Beck used to take phone calls from people. He doesn't do that anymore. That's not an accident. He's been told don't take phone calls anymore. Why? Because people will call in and attempt to educate him on a subject for which he is ignorant on or about. And that used to happen with regularity. I mean, very famously, my mom called in to Glenn Beck many years ago, right after Antonin Scalia was murdered. Justice Antonin Scalia was, of course, murdered. And he was very shortly after that, my mom called in to his show. And the screen caller said, because they were talking about, again, Antonin Scalia dying, and how unfortunate this is, and what does this mean for the Supreme Court, and blah, blah, blah. My mom called in and was like, he was assassinated, and said this to the screener, the call screener person. And the call screener said to her something to the tune of, well, we're not really going to talk about that, and we're not going to entertain that kind of theory. And that was it. And then they hung up on her. I mean, that right there shows that these individuals are not thinking people. They're incapable of thought. It doesn't make them awake. It actually proves quite the opposite. It proves that they are dead asleep. But again, the hypocrisy of who they call out and who they make a living making fun of, essentially. Certainly those on the proverbial left, while hardly ever criticizing anybody on the right. It just doesn't make them any different than those that they are making fun of and profiting from making fun of. It's astounding to me. I wish that people would stop giving them the attention that they're receiving. I really do. There's so much more that people could be paying attention to, so many more things that they could be learning. And just bypassing Tucker Carlson and Glenn Beck and Russell Brand and Tim Pool and all these other weirdos. I mean, these are, again, no offense, but here comes the offensive part. All those guys were just dorks in high school. They were just the dorks. They weren't the guys with the common sense. They were the guys who licked the boots, got straight A's, did whatever they had to do to get by, and always had their hand in the air because they wanted to tell the teacher something. I mean, this is a problem. This is a problem. And if people are listening to these kinds of individuals now because they're so-called influential regarding what? The number of clicks and likes that they have? It doesn't equate to intelligence. None of that does. So I wanted to get that off my chest because that kind of leads me right into this. I was listening to Glenn Beck the other day, just for about 5 minutes. In fact, it lasted less than that. And as I've said on the show before, I'll tune in periodically, either when I'm driving around or exercising or whatever, just to hear what stupid shit he's saying. And here's how he opened up this segment. He looks at his co-host, whose name is Stu, oddly enough, but either way, he looks at his co-host and he says, okay, I'm going to read this headline for you, and I want to get your first reaction. What was your first reaction to this? And he reads the headline having to do with the father of the Georgia school shooter being arrested on multiple charges of now murder. He didn't kill anybody, but he's being charged with murder, manslaughter, child endangerment, child recklessness, whatever the hell else he's been charged with. And he looks at his buddy Stu and he says, so what do you think about that headline? Without hesitation, Stu looks at him and says, I'm glad this is happening. This is a great thing. This is fantastic. Again, if I could jump through the radio and strangle them, I would have. The blind acceptance of that entire scenario, the way that it went down at face value, exposes these individuals for being the dummies that they truly are. And it is mind-bending how dumb these people are. But he didn't even hesitate, and he said, yes, This is absolutely fantastic. He should be in jail. He knew his son was a danger and everything else, and this needs to happen more often, and something to that extent. Glenn looks at him and says, "Really? I'm kind of shocked you would say that," he says. Of course, this is how stupid Glenn is. So Glenn looks at him and disagrees with him at face value first, and then he comes back and he starts to read more about what the guy or what the dad allegedly knew about his son. And about 2 minutes into reading other things, Glenn goes, "Okay, now I've changed my opinion. I think the dad does belong in jail. I think he does need to be charged with these kinds of things because parents should know better. And if the kid didn't have access to guns and wasn't given a gun by his dad for Christmas, well then, maybe those kids would still be alive and those 2 teachers would still be alive and this entire thing wouldn't have happened in the first place." And that was it. But that entire segment, albeit lasting, again, 3, 4, 5 minutes, that entire segment was artificial. It was completely artificially put together to make it sound like Glenn disagreed with Stu at first. They were playing good cop, bad cop to ultimately, of course, trick the listener of the show. So that the listener of the show would be so gullible as to not know more than Glenn Beck or his co-host Stu, and then think for themselves, and then apply that knowledge to the real world of what's really going on, only to then, of course, listen to Glenn Beck come around in the blink of an eye, because he's read a little bit more about what the dad did, and now, well, everybody should just agree with Glenn Beck and Stu. That Stu was smarter and quicker on the uptake regarding the issue than Glenn Beck was. So now again, everybody's just supposed to agree with Glenn and Stu because look, if Stu can convince Glenn that the dad was bad news and that the dad was responsible for this ultimately because he's the father and the parent and he should know better, well then you can come around also. It's social engineering. It's bad social engineering. They're not good at it. But they actually think that they're getting away with it. Here's what I'd love to see in the future. In particular with Tucker Carlson and certainly with Glenn Beck. If these 2 dummies get on a stage ever again and they do any kind of a Q&A, there need to be people who come up to the microphones and lean into them about what they do not know. You need to delegitimize these individuals, without a doubt. They need to be ostracized. It's unfortunate, again, that the same Jewish lobby that pays them is continuing, of course, to manipulate them, and they're continuing to allow it to happen. Again, Tucker Carlson can say he's gone his own way and he's independent and blah, blah, blah. Horseshit. There's no way. You don't find yourself on a stage like that unless you have a lawyer involved, managers involved, people working behind the scenes for you. There's just no way. It wasn't because Glenn Beck picked up the phone and said, "Hey, Tucker, come on out to Salt Lake City and blah, 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 and we'll get on a stage and it'll be great and I'll give you half of the money and that'll be that." It wasn't that simple. It's way more complicated. Topics to talk about, topics to not talk about. Hands to shake and hands to not shake. This is the magic trick that they're pulling over people's eyes. It doesn't make them any different than Fox News. And like I said earlier, it doesn't make them any different than the actual people that they make a living criticizing. Because let's face it, when it comes to the Georgia scenario, there are endless unanswered questions. Endless unanswered questions. As I said in the Substack article about it, which if you haven't checked that out, I highly recommend checking that out. Not only is it the largest infringement on our rights, everybody has to know that this entire scheme is being put together by the Jewish lobby and lawyers to strip us of our rights, to guilt parents into not owning nor gifting guns to their children. Now, regarding the gifting of the gun, you can't gift a gun legally to a minor and expect the gun to then be legally owned by the minor. Every gun owner is aware of this, that unless you are 18 years old or older, is the gun legally yours? Which means the gun wasn't really the kid's. The dad can give it to him as a gift. The dad can buy it for himself and say, I've got you this gun. This is yours. You're not 18 yet, but when you turn 18, this will be officially yours. It's just words. That's what makes the Second Amendment and gun laws so flippin' cool, is it's just words. Because that's all you should need. You shouldn't need laws and regulations and paperwork and checkboxes and whatever else. It's just simple words. In the United States, to own a rifle or a shotgun, you have to be 18. Now, unfortunately, in some states, that's a little different. You have to be older than that, like 21. But either way, then to own a pistol or a revolver, you have to be 21 or older. But even so, you can't legally give a gun to a kid and have that kid believe that it is theirs legally when they're not 18 years old. The dad knew that, which means no crime was committed regarding the purchase of the gun or even telling his son, this is your gun when you are 18 years old. You can use this when we go hunt. You can use this when we target practice. It will be yours that you will use because I have my own. But in the future, it's technically still mine because I'm the adult and I can't gift it to you technically because you're not 18. Therefore, you can't walk around with it. You can't drive from point A to point B with it because it's not yours. Every gun owner knows this, and every lawyer should know this too. This was the problem. It was one of many problems, but it was one of the problems with the Oxford, Michigan Crumbly case. Same thing. That fact never got brought up in court. Not once. They never said the gun was never really Ethan's. He was gifted the gun, quote unquote, by his father, as if to say, this will be yours when you are 21 years old, because it was a pistol at the time. So it's not technically yours, it's technically mine, the father. But you can use it when we go to the range and when we target practice, and there you have it. Otherwise, it's mine. That's it. That was never brought up in court. It was never brought up in court that Ethan stole the gun. Seems like a rather big detail, doesn't it? I mean, that's something that should have been brought up. That the gun was in Dad's possession at the time, and then, of course, Ethan stole it, and then went and killed people. No different in this scenario. The gun isn't technically the kid's. But see, that's not being discussed. That's not being brought up. Here's the other thing that's not being brought up. How did the gun get in the building? This is a massive unanswered question. How is it that the gun got inside of the building? There's no way. And I saw a picture of the gun. It was a rather large gun. I believe it was a Bushmaster. But either way, it doesn't matter. How did the gun get in the building? They're in a trench coat big enough to hide that rifle. He didn't bring it in a baseball bag, and one of those bags that baseball players have with a bat and whatever else. I mean, he didn't carry it in with that, did he? He wasn't hiding it in his book bag. You can't hide that gun in a book bag. How did the gun get there? How was he able to just walk in a building with a giant rifle and no one stop him? It seems like a rather serious detail, doesn't it? It's amazing, but no one's asking these questions. It's nope, you're guilty until proven innocent. And now they have the right-wing media going along with all of this. Yes, they're charging the father and this should happen and here's why. They're not even questioning the charges. They're actually rationalizing the charges now. And they're saying he's being charged because, and then they're even referencing now Oxford, Michigan's case. Well, Michigan has set a precedent, so now it can exist. Because if there's even the slight thought that a child might use it against someone else, well, then the parent is just supposed to have telepathy and they're supposed to just know this. Now, I've listened to the audio from the previous time when local police questioned the father and the kid about again, owning guns and does your kid have access to them and whatever else. The dad sounds completely crystal clear. He says, look, he gets picked on in school, but he just killed his first deer, and we target practice, and I'm trying to teach him about the outdoors and keep him away from video games, and this is an activity. This is what we do, and it's a lawful activity. Which means the next thing that they're going to do when it comes to gun rights is they're going to keep parents from teaching their children how to use a gun. If you don't think that that's intentional, I assure you it is. There are multiple tentacles on this octopus here that is going after everyone's rights. We know who the octopus is, but this is not an accident. For example, children in the future probably won't be able to hunt with their fathers, regardless of how young they are. This is the direction in which Georgia is seeking to go regarding this case. They're not holding school officials accountable for being retards, which is exactly what they could do, because there's more than enough ample evidence to prove that the people in that building are retarded. In fact, the more that comes out, the more that's the case. The more information that comes out, that's proving to be the case. Hell, they ran around the building looking for a kid who doesn't exist, who had a name that wasn't even a student there. They tried to pass it off by saying, well, we were looking for this other kid, but and he has a very similar name. Same last name, similar first name, but it turned out that it wasn't him. You were looking for someone that doesn't exist. The other aspect, of course, which I mentioned in the Substack also, is the Centegix company and how Centegix is based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And this school just adopted the Centegix program 1 week prior. What are the odds of that? That all of a sudden now, they're touting Centegix as being, again, the cat's pajamas. I can't believe it. I mean, I can, because this is what happens. This is their fallback. This is always a strategy. Well, thank God for Centegix, and thank God for this card that all the teachers wear around their necks, because that alerted us, and we were there, Johnny on the spot, no problem, and we solved that situation in less than 6 minutes. Yes, 4 people died. That doesn't matter. Don't pay attention to that. But either way, yeah, we weren't in lockdown either, and we should have been, but again, don't pay attention to that. Just pay attention to this company that just so happens to operate right down the street, or certainly in the general vicinity of our school district, that we just happened to adopt a week prior. And now we're using this company as being our life-saving measure, that this was the thing that saved more lives. It could have been a whole lot worse, quote unquote. It could have been a whole lot worse. That rationalization right there should show everybody that that is the scheme. The scheme is to fill these buildings with endless measures and security measures that no one inside can truly manage. They can't manage them. They don't know how. There's too many policies. There's too many procedures. Hell, the lockdown procedure wasn't even followed. That's what got the one guy killed, allegedly. Well, thank God he opened the door, they said. They even said that. Thank God he opened the door to see what all the commotion was about. Because, again, he got shot in the doorway. And had he not have gotten shot in the doorway, well, the gunman could have come through the doorway and killed us all, and I don't even want to think about the horror. There were people actually saying that. If he'd have just locked his door, or if all the doors locked from the outside, or actually, I'm sorry, locked from the inside, all he had to do was not open the door and he'd still be alive. If he is in fact dead. This is the school system. This is the American school system. And these are the politicians who support it. Because I haven't heard any politician come out publicly at all and say this is a complete infringement on people's right to bear arms. Again, shall not be infringed is rather clear. But this is exactly what this is setting up. that parents can't instruct their children on how to use a firearm, that no child should ever touch a firearm, and if a parent does have their child touch a firearm, then the parent will be arrested for negligence, firearm negligence, or something to that effect. Again, if they can't get something at the federal level or even at the state level first, which we know that they can't, they, of course, could certainly try with legislation, but it's not going so well. So what do they do then? What's their next move? Their next move is to do exactly what they've done with the Crumbly parents, and it's exactly what they've done here in this particular case. You arrest the father, you arrest the mother, or any other family member who is responsible for owning the gun and purchasing the gun and whatever, who just happened to let the kid touch the gun or have the gun or learn how to use the gun or whatever and shoot the gun. And you throw every single charge at them that you possibly can, and then you lock them up for 2 years without bail, as if they were the actual murderer. And then you have them go to trial, again with a rigged jury filled with individuals whose emotions are still fresh in their minds, and oh, the horror. And instead of putting the blame on the person who actually pulled the trigger and asking other questions, including, of course, why was the entire school building so stupid? And why were the people in that building so stupid? And why aren't they being held accountable? Nope, they won't blame anybody else related to it. They'll just go after the individual who actually purchased the weapon. They'll go after the parent first. And then they'll lock them up for 15 to 25 years for something they didn't even do. Because from a social standpoint, that sends a message across the entire landscape of human beings in America that this could be you, that this could be your kid, and that you could be this parent, and you don't know because he didn't think that would happen, and you probably don't think it'll happen to you, so you best be aware. In fact, the best way for you to be aware is to just not own a gun. Don't defend yourself or your family at all. Don't even own a gun, and just guilt people into not owning a gun. And then the most gullible will believe it. Again, I wonder if Tucker Carlson and Glenn Beck are bringing up any of this on their stage. My guess is they're not, because they're not that bright. Now, speaking of other things, again, related to this particular case, this was actually from the Gateway Pundit, which is ironic, because they jumped the gun on all of this too. But here's what it says. Again, this will prove to you how stupid the people are who work within this building. It was titled, Update, Warning Call Placed to School on Morning of Georgia Shooting was made by shooter's mother. Quote, I told them it was an extreme emergency. Here's what it says. It says the Gateway Pundit previously reported on the suspicious warning call that Appalachia High School reportedly received the morning of the shooting. It says now bombshell text messages have been released by the Washington Post, showing that the warning calls that were previously reported came from the shooter's mother, Marcy Gray. According to the reports, Marcy told family members via text messages that she called the high school the morning of the shooting and warned a counselor about an extreme emergency, quote-unquote, involving her 14-year-old son, Colt Gray. We were looking for a Colton Gray the whole time. We got it mixed up, but that's not our fault that we can't hear properly, let alone know that there's not a Colton Gray in the building. But there is a Colt Gray. Again, these people are so retarded. It goes on, sorry, I digress. It says the claims are supported by a call log data showing a 10-minute phone call from Marcy's phone to the school about half an hour before the gunman began firing. The text message from Marcy reads, quote, I was the one that notified the school counselor at the high school. Oh, so now another counselor knew that there was an emergency with a kid, and instead of going into lockdown or going to immediately find the only kid in the building named Colt Gray, which apparently they can't even do that. They didn't do any of that. They started to chase around a kid who doesn't exist. And then the shooting starts 30 minutes later. It says, quote, I told them it was an extreme emergency and for them to go immediately and find my son to check on him, unquote. According to the shooter's sister, Annie Brown, a counselor told Marcy during the call that her son Colt had been talking about school shootings earlier in the morning. The report states that the school administrators had gone to check on the boy, but due to a mix-up with names, they were unable to locate him and ended up confiscating the wrong student's bag just minutes before the shooting took place. So, again, even if there is a kid in the building who has a similar name, how on earth do you mix that up? How does that get mixed up? It says in a follow-up interview with the Post, Marcy confirmed that she was indeed the one who called the school the morning of the shooting, although she declined to elaborate on what prompted the calls. That's kind of important. She added that the shooting was, quote, absolutely horrific, while apologizing to the families of the victims on behalf of her son. I am so sorry and cannot fathom the pain and suffering they are going through right now, Marcy told the Post. Well, based on Oxford, Michigan events from the past, shouldn't Marcy be in prison? Because Mr. Crumbly, James Crumbly, made the same phone call to the school and talked with a counselor who got shit wrong. Again, there's a pattern here. It's not negligent parents per se. They're not, parents of the year, but that's not a crime. The negligence exists in the school buildings. The stupidity exists in the school buildings. And then it says this, quote, the school's lackadaisical response to this anonymous warning is deeply troubling. That's putting it mildly. How could the school fail to identify the correct child under such extreme circumstances? Instead of taking proactive measures to ensure student safety, school officials seemingly brushed off the warning, leading to the unnecessary loss of innocent lives. Furthermore, the FBI was alerted by two threats, Gray made about shooting up his school a full year prior to him committing his heinous act. Agents were even dispatched to his house and confirmed the presence of firearms in the home. The then 13-year-old told agents that he didn't post the threatening messages, which apparently was good enough for them to close the book and walk away. An official statement from the agency claims that they did not continue surveillance of any kind and did not even notify local authorities of the incident. Instead, they alerted the school counselors who, as noted above, are the ones who received the calls from the concerned mother. Why did they not locate him immediately? As with many of these recent shootings, the more information that comes out, the more suspicious the whole situation becomes, unquote. No shit. The policy is crystal clear here. The real policy is crystal clear as to what you're supposed to do. In situations like this, you get a phone call like that. You immediately alert the resource officer and you run to their location. You sprint, full-blown running. Where is so-and-so? Come with me now. And then again, it's not even a stand in the doorway as a resource officer and say, come with me now. The resource officer walks into the room, says, where is so-and-so? And then they make a beeline right for them. They say, give me your bag, get up, let's go. It doesn't matter if there's panic in the room. It doesn't matter what the hell's going on. That's what should happen. But that's not what happens. SROs are too busy in many cases hitting on the secretaries. They're too busy flipping their keys in their hands as they're walking from point A to point B. These are some of the fattest, laziest human beings you'll ever see in your entire life. It's embarrassing, actually. It's full-blown embarrassing. It's like you're not good enough to be a cop, so you have to be a cop in a school building now. And they're not even good at that. Which, by the way, side note, the day or so after this took place, I was riding around, and wouldn't you know it, all the cop cars were out in front of school buildings now. They're all parked right in front of the front door, as if that's somehow going to be a deterrent for someone who brings a weapon in a building to do the killing or the harming inside the actual building. This is how stupid these people are. I'll just park my cop car right out here in front and, well, the want to be murderer will have second thoughts once they see police written on the side of my squad car. That'll show them. That's how stupid they are. They think that works. They think that that's some kind of a strategy. It's embarrassing. So here's what's going to happen, almost guaranteed. Centegix is probably filling out orders right now for their stupid product, left and right. They're making money hand over fist. Now, who do you think operates or put together Centegix? If you even suspected a three-letter agency, you would be correct. It has to be the case. They have to have their fingers in this. Now, it isn't like you're going to find CIA, FBI, ATF written on Centegix's About page on their website. It's not going to say, who we are. Who are we? Well, we're three-letter agencies and we put this thing together. I mean, they're not even going to be named. So certainly don't expect that to happen. But someone on the inside of that business and that company has ties to someone who works for a three-letter agency. In fact, and it should be noted, many of these so-called school security systems and programs and policies and professional development, they're all run by ex-military individuals or ex-three-letter agency individuals or current three-letter agency individuals potentially off the books. This is the case. I even remember once sending my second book, Violence Among Students and School Staff. I sent that book to, or at least let this particular group know of this book. And it was a particular company, again, set up by ex-CIA, ex-military guys. And they were running a security firm, so to speak, a school security firm or a workplace security firm out of Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken. And they were like, oh man, this is great. This is exactly the kind of environment that we're looking to get into. And this is the exact kind of thing that we're interested in. I'm going, wait a minute. Read the book. If you read the book, you're going to find out that professional development and security systems aren't actually the problem. Your problem is inside the building. The problem with these shootings isn't video games, as even the Fox and Friends dopes on Fox News would consistently lead people to believe. That's not it either. This has to do with the school environment being unhealthy for everybody. It's loaded with competition. It's loaded with illegality. It's loaded with lies in the curriculum. The list is endless. It's the environment. That's the problem. When was the last time you heard of a homeschooling kid shooting up his family? When was the last time you heard of a homeschooling kid shooting up anybody? It typically doesn't happen. And of course, there's this aspect of the Appalachia High School quote-unquote shooting. The dad and the kid are white. So there's that. Notice how they've never gone after black parents or charged black parents or a black parent with any such crime, like murder or manslaughter, because their young child, below the age of 18, possessed a gun that was either purchased for them or in their possession while they were living under the same roof, and then went and committed a crime. This hasn't been done to a black family. Now, it was done, actually, I should rephrase that. It was done to the black mother of the black kid, elementary school kid in Virginia who shot his teacher in the stomach a year or two ago, whenever that occurred. She was criminally charged, and she is in prison. But notice how no one's talking about that. Why? Well, because she's black. They have to take these white people, and they have to plaster them all over the television as if to say, don't own guns, white people, because we're coming after you. That's the message they're trying to send people. And only the gullible will believe it. And then, of course, just a couple of days later after that shooting, you had the Hartford County Sheriff speaking to the media in Joppatown, Maryland, where there was a scuffle between two Maryland high school students and one of them was shot to death. and died later at the hospital. They released the name of the kid who did the shooting, but not the 16-year-old who was later killed. The one who did the shooting was named Warren Curtis Grant. Probably not white. And the one he shot in the scuffle, also probably not white. Let's bounce over to the U.S. News and World Report, by the way, regarding the demographics of this particular high school, Joppatown High School. Enrollment, 833 students. It ranks 10,864 in national rankings. Not good. Number of students, or percentage of students rather, who took an AP exam, 52%. Passed at least one AP exam, 13%. Their scorecard, by the way, is a 38.46 out of 100. Not good. Reading proficiency, 29%. Science proficiency, 14%, with a 77% graduation rate. They can't read. They can't write. They can't do much, but they're still graduating somehow. 75.3% minority enrollment. 53.2% black, 24.5% white, 11.6% Hispanic, 8.9% two or more races, 1.2% Asian, and so on and so on. 73% economically disadvantaged, 67% free lunch program, 6% reduced price lunch program. Full-time equivalent teachers, 55 in the building. And their math scores, by the way, are even worse. 10% proficiency. 10%. And somehow they're graduating 77% of their student population. Okay. What a nightmare. No one's asking what's going on inside of the buildings. This is continuing to be just glossed over, if not downright ignored. Appalachia High School. How did the kid get the gun in the building? It's the easiest flipping question to answer. There should be endless footage, and we should find that question out very quickly. We can see a picture of the gun on the floor, where he was allegedly detained by 3 resource officers. But we can't see the security footage of him entering the building with a gun. Why is it that we're being shown one thing and not the other? I'm going to stay on top of this stuff, but I came across also this. I'll just mention this sort of in conclusion before I move on to some jab stuff here, and there's a great deal to cover. But I came across a tweet having to do with that Joppatown, Maryland shooting, and it was apparently a mother who was openly saying that everybody needs to pull their kids out of school until January of 2025. Pull them out now because they're unsafe. But don't worry, in January 2025, everything's going to be fixed. Who believes that? How foolish do you actually have to be in order to believe such a thing? These buildings are not going to improve. This is not a business that can be saved. It has too much infiltration from 3-letter agencies. The Jewish lobby has too much control over the curriculum and the brainwashing that goes on inside of these buildings. They're counting on you not waking up to that fact and continuing to send your children into these meat grinders. They are not going to change magically if Donald Trump gets back into office, quote unquote. That's not going to happen. You've heard me say it before. The Department of Education employs approximately 4,000 people. They rake in approximately $70 billion per year from taxpayers. Getting rid of the Department of Education, all 4,000 employees plus, and $70+ billion a year, still won't fix the problem. It's a good start, but it still won't fix it. Then, as I've said before, what you're going to see is you're going to see the fight at the state level get more weird than you can possibly imagine. This is where all the gays and the weirdos are going to come out of the cracks, and they're all going to start doing whatever they have to do to make your school different and better and more inclusive and diverse than ever before. And then the school systems are going to eat each other more than they already are now. See, now they're in the business of all essentially trying to copycat one another. What does this school have? What does this school have? If they're a public school and we're a public school, we need to talk to each other and figure out what we can do that's exactly the same. Let's get on the same page and solve the same problems the exact same way. Well, that's called communism. That's how they operate now. But with the removal of the Department of Education and the real battle taking place at the very local level, it's only going to get gayer and more weird at the local level than, again, what people can possibly imagine. I'm not saying that it's a step that is a bad step. I think that once that happens, that's going to wake up even more people to how corrupt the whole business is and how degenerate these buildings are and the people who work within, by and large. I think that's going to be the case. Every move that occurs here with American education and these bricks just tumbling over, it's just going to expose the business more than it's ever been exposed. You would have thought that 2020 would have been the nail in the coffin, the final nail, but not so. It was a big nail, and it certainly helped, thank God, that endless parents woke up to all of these COVID and jab lies and decided to not send their children permanently ever again to these buildings. But many parents sent their kids right back into the meat grinder. And it's not, nothing's changing. Everybody's just supposed to forget that they were gagged and abused. COVID's become another fictitious timeline on the fictitious line of timelines. There was the Ice Age, and then there was the pandemic. And, well, it changed us all, and we learned a great deal, but we hope we don't have to go back to that time. It never existed. It was in everybody's imagination because you were told it existed by liars. Absolutely nuts. Okay, now here's the unfortunate collateral damage from that lie and that COVID lie. Jab-related things now. If you've seen this commercial on YouTube, you know exactly the one I'm talking about, and it is an absolute abomination. It's a Walgreens commercial that has a white husband, an Asian wife, and a mixed-race kid, and the wife and the kid are sitting at the kitchen table. And the husband is in another room and shouts into the room and says, "Hey, honey, have you gotten Billy his COVID appointment yet? His COVID and flu shot appointment yet?" Something like that. And then she looks at her phone, and she's on some Walgreens app or something, and she's scheduling their child for a COVID and a flu shot at the same time through this app on their phone, and it's all a commercial about convenience. And then the kid leans forward, and he's got a big smile on his face like, "Thanks, Mom. You really helped out." They're going to kill their son. That's all that means. Their son is now going to die from receiving both shots, individually or collectively, at separate or at the exact same times. And that's it. Walgreens, we're here for you. I bet you are. I can't believe that they are still allowed to air these commercials. I can't believe it. There was also this one. This is from Fox10Phoenix.com. U.S. Air Force Academy cadet, 19 years old, found dead in dorm room. It says the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado has launched an investigation after a 19-year-old cadet was found dead in her dorm room this week. Cadet 4th Class Avery Kuntz, 19 years old, of Taylor, Texas, was found unconscious in her dormitory on Wednesday night, and attempted life-saving measures by first responders were unsuccessful, the Academy said in a statement. Kuntz was set to graduate in 2028 and was a member of the women's track and field team. In order to attend, ladies and gentlemen, the U.S. Air Force Academy, you have to be jabbed to the bone with everything and anything. There's no foul play here. The only foul play, of course, is that she was given biological weapons under the guise of being a preventative medicine. That's it. And again, where's Tucker Carlson and Glenn Beck on that one? Where's Tim Pool on that one? Are they bringing these kinds of things up with any regularity, that it's shot-related? Here's another one. This is from the Daily Mail, titled, Florida High School Football Player Dies After Collapsing During Game in Latest On-Field Tragedy. The Florida Panhandle High School football player has died after collapsing during a game on Friday night at Liberty County High School in Bristol. Port St. Joe High School wide receiver and defensive back Chance Gaynor collapsed during the game at Liberty County High School. The 18-year-old senior was playing cornerback when a play went to the opposite side of the field, said Tim Davis, Port St. Joe's athletic director and vice principal. Gaynor was running down the play when he collapsed. He just went down on the ground suddenly, quote unquote. They keep saying suddenly, and yet they can't figure this out. He was taken by ambulance to the hospital where he died. Was he jabbed? Probably. It's not a heat-related thing. It's not exhaustion. It's not stress. These are all the excuses that they use. That kid was jabbed to the bone. Here's one having to do with Pfizer and their digital platform. This was from the Connecticut Sentinel.com. It was titled, Pfizer Launches Pfizer for All, quote unquote, a digital platform that paves the way for vaccine passports. It says on August 27th of 2024, Pfizer announced the launch of Pfizer for All, a new digital platform for managing everyday health, quote unquote, for millions of Americans. Yes, I'm sure that's what you're doing. It says that the platform was designed for patients with migraine, COVID, or the flu, and adults seeking vaccines for COVID, flu, RSV, and pneumonia. Pfizer boasts that individuals and their families can use the new platform to connect with qualified healthcare professionals on the same day to check eligibility, quote unquote, for vaccines, to find and book vaccines, to fill prescriptions, and more. Patients will be able to use existing insurance and pharmacy programs as well as new direct services such as Upscript Health, Alto Pharmacy, and Instacart, all conveniently on the same platform. It says, quote, people often experience information overload and encounter roadblocks when making decisions for themselves or their family in our complex and often overwhelming U.S. healthcare system. That's right. A counter opinion and facts are considered roadblocks or an overload of information, so Pfizer would lead you to believe. This can be extremely time-consuming, they say, and lead to indecision or inaction. And as a result, poor health outcomes, unquote, said Amir Malik, Executive Vice President, Chief U.S. Commercial Officer, Pfizer. Quote, we are pleased to offer Pfizer for All to help relieve this burden on people, especially as we enter the fall season in the U.S. and streamline the path for those seeking better health. How thoughtful of Pfizer, it says, to unburden people with what has been. Pfizer will continue to expand and develop Pfizer for All to potentially address a broader range of needs and conditions going forward. Pfizer for All sure does sound like a digital vaccine passport program, doesn't it? Yeah, it sounds just like, again, a tracking device. Just another step, of course, in the Internet of Bodies, your digital twin, and the wireless body area network, without a doubt. Fortunately, however, with less individuals taking these deadly bioweapons, which they should be, in fact, they shouldn't be taking them at all, unfortunately, the CDC themselves is now pushing these COVID jabs, which of course are not legal vaccinations by any stretch of the imagination, on newborn babies. This was from Sign of the Times, and it said there is no licensed COVID vaccines for kids under 12, but CDC wants babies to get 3 Pfizer shots by age 9 months, which means they'll be dead. This is a kill program. It can't get any clearer. 3 shots in a baby of the COVID shots. Why on earth are people not awake to this? Here's one last one here. Brownstone Institute. Trust in doctors and hospitals plummets. On one hand, we're supposed to be jabbing babies, but on the other, why is trust dropping among hospitals and doctors, with hospitals and doctors. It says a new paper in JAMA analyzes survey respondents in the U.S. over the period of time right after the COVID pandemic. There was no pandemic nor COVID. Started in April of 2020 and through early of 2024. It reveals a significant decline in trust in physicians and hospitals, dropping from 71.5% in April of 2020 to 40.1% in January of 2024. Lower trust levels were strongly associated with reduced likelihood of receiving COVID-19 vaccinations and boosters. No kidding. Financial motives, poor quality of care and negligence, influence of external entities and agendas, and discrimination and biases were also measured. Again, not surprising to us. We are well aware. I have three more things I want to bring up here, kind of geopolitical, just to sort of round this out here. You may recall, again, in a previous episode, I was referencing Kash Patel and his conversation with Sean Ryan and some of the preparatory vigilance kind of things that were being brought up. There was another aspect of that, which I don't think I mentioned on the show, but I wanted to get to here very quickly. Kash Patel has consistently brought up the business of potentially having a 24/7 declassification sort of wing of the government or an office in government that allows for full transparency. I hate that word, but you get what I'm saying. The full truth, hopefully. And then setting up basically a website for anyone in the world to access in order to read these documents. That way, hopefully, the truth will not be hidden and it will be out in the open. If this were to happen, in particular now, I think this would be an absolutely fantastic thing. And here's why. There are more citizen journalists now than ever before. There are more awake people now than ever before. That whole saying, and again, that cue phrase of "we are the news," and that we need to be careful with this kind of information, but at the exact same time, it's a massive responsibility to share the truth with people. And with it comes, of course, peril and a number of other things. Lost opportunities, so to speak, and whatever else. But even so, there are more citizen journalists out there now than ever before. There are more shows like this out there than ever before. And if we got our hands on declassified information, we're able to sift through it and then bring that to our audiences, that would be huge. That would be a very, very big thing. Because again, we would be able to bypass, more so than we already are, the Tucker Carlsons of the world, the Glenn Becks of the world, and the Tim Pools of the world. I personally think that's a move that has to happen. I think it would be an excellent move, again, assuming that the information that is provided is in fact the declassified truth without redactions, where people can again read about people, events, schemes, plans, you name it. I mean, you're talking about an absolute treasure trove of information regarding God knows how many subjects. If such an office existed, you can guarantee I would dive deep into the education wing of any classified documents having to do, again, with whatever. Teachers' unions, school shootings, you name it. More so, of course, than I already have, and more so than the actual documents that I've actually even provided on my website, which are free to view anytime you want. But that would be a very cool thing if that were to actually happen. Another thing that Kash was talking about very specifically on the Spotlight, the X22 Spotlight report there with Dave over there, is he was asked what he thinks is going to happen here regarding the upcoming election, and he seems to believe, although I don't think that the outcome of this scenario is a likely one, but the actual scenario itself certainly could be, and that is that Joe Biden resigns before the election and Kamala Harris just becomes the president. And that if that happens before the election, the motive behind it would be that Kamala Harris would write pardons for Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, and their entire family regarding any number of things. The only problem with that is that Joe Biden isn't the lawful president of the United States. Neither is Kamala Harris. She's not the lawful vice president of the United States right now because of what happened in 2020. When that proof comes out, there wouldn't even have to be an impeachment of Joe Biden. It would just be known that he was not the lawful president of the United States. Therefore, any appointment he made would be reversed, including Supreme Court Justice Jackson. She would be off the bench. Of course, the same scenario has been brought up with Barack Obama as well in all of his appointments, because he wasn't lawfully, nor could be lawfully, the president of the United States because he wasn't born here. So with that said, in this particular case, not only are the appointments that Joe Biden has made that are basically completely unlawful because he's not the president, but any pardon that he were to write on a piece of paper would be equivalent to signing a monopoly contract during the game of Monopoly. It would hold no water. It would hold no weight, and it would just be an empty, illegal document that wouldn't be able to do anything. So they can't escape this. I don't think that they can escape anything that's coming at all. And anybody, again, who goes along with it is going along with something, either knowingly or unknowingly, but they're going along with something that is completely unlawful. So I think it's possible that Kamala Harris could jump in, and that Joe could take a back seat and say, I'm resigning the presidency because of family matters and blah, blah, blah. But now Kamala Harris is taking over and she's going to make a great president in the future and whatever else. And then everybody would again applaud her and say, well, what a historic moment. We have the first female black president, even though she's not black. And that's what the media would run with. And they would actually use that as some kind of a campaign scheme or a talking point or some favorability thing that they actually think would win. But again, it won't help them, not in the slightest. But it's certainly a strategy that they may use. But again, regarding the pardon business, it's completely unlawful. I don't see that actually taking place. There's also this. A lot of reports right now that the Venezuelan takeover, quote unquote, in Aurora, Colorado, in certain apartment buildings is not as big as what some people are saying. It's still a problem, and it's still a problem that people should talk about, but there's also this problem too. And again, it's making the news more and more regarding the business of Springfield, Ohio, and the Haitians that are taking over that entire town. It's about, I want to say, an hour and a half maybe from where I live, maybe a little less than that. Either way, that doesn't matter necessarily, but there's this aspect of this war, which is one of the sort of, I would say, hidden elements in this war that is really being used and schemed by the Jewish lobby in order to essentially elbow out lawful, legal Americans who want to actually work in our country. This is from the consultant at Civilian1A on X, and they said the following. They said, quote, how 20,000 Haitians stormed Ohio to take jobs that were never advertised. Receipts at the end of thread. And here's just a little bit of it. It says, the Haitian invasion of Ohio has created a lot of buzz. There's a lot of unexplained aspects of it that people find odd. One of these strange happenings is that locals reported that the jobs the Haitians came for were never advertised to the local population. So how did the Haitians find out about them? It turns out that a network of federal grant recipient organizations have quietly seized control of nearly the entire job market in the United States and work to ensure that openings remain hidden, quote unquote, so that refugees can take them ahead of American citizens. How many job openings remain hidden? It says the internal estimates of this network put the number of hidden openings at 80% of all available jobs. 80%. It says the way that this network has seized control of the labor market of the United States is easy enough to understand. Firstly, it has positioned itself as the way to remove recruiting costs for employers. Next, it offers employers laborers who can work for lower wages. And then it goes on and on and on. I think you get the gist of it. Illegals are not the ones who schemed this plan. The Jewish lobby did. Only they could put something together like this and make sure that white Americans or any legal American, regardless of race, but certainly Xing out whites, would be something that they would put together and that they would scheme and meddle about. No doubt about it. They created this. It's happening. It is a real thing. Just wanted to bring that to your attention. And finally, on a rather obvious note, this was an actual study. I don't think I brought this up on the show in the past, but it's possible I have. If I have, well, I'm just going to repeat myself because I found this to be, again, not unusual, but certainly hilarious. This was a particular inside university study in Ann Arbor, Michigan, of the Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research, and this was distributed in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, right here, and this is from a Paul Zak, and it was titled, Testosterone Administration Induces a Redshift in Democrats. Here's the abstract. It says the following, quote, "We tested the fixity of political preference in 136 healthy males during the 2011 U.S. presidential election season by administering synthetic testosterone or placebo to participants who identified the strength of their political affiliation. Before the testosterone treatment, we found that weakly affiliated Democrats had 19% higher basal testosterone than those who identified strongly with the party. When weakly affiliated Democrats received additional testosterone, the strength of their party fell by 12%, it says, and they reported 45% warmer feelings toward Republican candidates for president. Our results demonstrate that testosterone induces a redshift, quote unquote, among weakly affiliated Democrats. This effect was associated with improved mood. No effects were found of testosterone administration for strongly affiliated Democrats or strong or weak Republicans. Our findings provide evidence that neuroactive hormones affect political preference." Unquote. Proving yet once again that Democrats tend to be soy boys, weak, not strong, super gay, very low on testosterone, which clearly you can see at face value, given the whole White Guys for Harris campaign and whatever the hell that thing was. But yeah, not surprising. We can just kind of sometimes look at people and figure it out. But now it's science, so you have to trust the science, don't you? I mean, they put yard signs in their yards that said, "Trust the science." Can't deny it now. Thanks for listening as always, ladies and gentlemen, and I will catch you on Wednesday. Peace.
Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.